You're listening to Audiology. Support our work on Patreon and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. Stephen Kevin Bannon, born on November 27, 1953, in Norfolk, Virginia, comes from a working-class background. His mother, Doris Herr Bannon, stayed at home, while his father, Martin J. Bannon, Jr., worked hard as a telephone lineman and later as a middle manager for American Telephone and Telegraph Company. The Bannon family, strong supporters of the Kennedys and staunch Union Democrats, rooted themselves in Irish and German ancestry, with many of Bannon's maternal relatives calling the Baltimore area their home. Bannon's educational journey began at Benedictine College Preparatory, private Catholic military high school in Richmond, Virginia, from which he graduated in 1971. His leadership qualities shone early as he served as president of the Student Government Association at Virginia Tech, where he went for college. Throughout his college years, Bannon wasn't one to shy away from hard work, spending his summers earning some extra cash at a local junkyard. In 1976, Bannon wrapped up his undergraduate studies at Virginia Tech's College of Architecture and Urban Studies, earning a bachelor's degree in urban planning. His thirst for knowledge didn't stop there. While dedicating his time to the Navy, Bannon pursued further studies, attaining a master's degree in national security studies from Georgetown University School of Foreign Service in 1983. Not resting on his laurels, Bannon reached another milestone in 1985 when he graduated with a Master of Business Administration with honors from the prestigious Harvard Business School. Steve Bannon served in the U.S. Navy from 1977 to 1983. Where he worked on the USS Paul F. Foster as a surface warfare officer within the Pacific Fleet and later as a special assistant to the Pentagon's Chief of Naval Operations. In this role, Bannon was responsible for facilitating communications between high-ranking officials and reporting on the global status of the Navy's fleet. During his tenure at the Pentagon, Bannon pursued further education at Georgetown University in the evenings, ultimately earning a master's degree in national security studies. In 1980, Bannon was part of the team deployed to the Persian Gulf for Operation Eagle Claw, which was an endeavor during the Iran hostage crisis. Reflecting on this in a 2015 interview, Bannon mentioned that the operation's failure significantly shifted his political outlook from relatively nonpartisan to strongly supportive of Ronald Reagan's ideology, a stance further solidified by the events of September 11th. Bannon shared his disillusionment with previous U.S. leadership, stating, "I wasn't political until I got into the service and saw how badly Jimmy Carter messed things up. I became a huge Reagan admirer, still am, but what turned me against the whole establishment was coming back from running companies in Asia in 2008 and seeing that George W. Bush had messed up as badly as Carter. The whole country was a disaster." This period of Bannon's life marked a dramatic shift in his political beliefs, setting the stage for his future endeavors. After finishing his time in the military, Steve Bannon took a job at Goldman Sachs, where he focused on mergers and acquisitions. In 1987, he moved from New York to Los Angeles. The reason for his move was to help Goldman Sachs grow its business in the entertainment sector. Bannon worked in this role in Los Angeles for 2 years, eventually leaving his position as a vice president. Back in 1990, Steve Bannon and a group of his former colleagues from Goldman Sachs decided to start their own venture, creating an investment bank called Bannon & Company, with a focus on the media sector. One of their noteworthy deals involved representing Westinghouse Electric, which was looking to sell its stake in Castle Rock Entertainment. Bannon played a key role in brokering the deal to sell Castle Rock to the Turner Broadcasting System, owned by media mogul Ted Turner at the time. During the negotiations, rather than going for a traditional advisory fee, Bannon & Company opted to receive a financial interest in 5 television shows, with Seinfeld among them. At that point, Seinfeld was just beginning its 3rd season. Thanks to this savvy decision, Bannon continues to earn cash residuals every time an episode of Seinfeld is shown. The company Bannon helped start eventually caught the eye of a larger firm, and in 1998, Société Générale acquired Bannon & Company. Back in 1993, when Steve Bannon was at the helm of Bannon & Company, he also took on the role of acting director for an earth science project called Biosphere 2, located in Oracle, Arizona. Under his leadership, the project, which was initially focused on exploring human space exploration and colonization, pivoted its focus towards examining the Earth's environment, including issues like pollution and climate change. Bannon wrapped up his involvement with Biosphere 2 in 1995. In the 1990s, Steve Bannon dived into the world of entertainment, taking on the role of a Hollywood film and media executive producer. He was behind the production of 18 movies, including notable titles like Sean Penn's The Indian Runner in 1991 and Julie Taymor's Titus in 1999. Bannon teamed up with Jeff Quaternet at The Firm, Incorporated, key player in film and television management, serving as a partner there in 2002 and 2003. By 2004, Bannon had moved on to documentary filmmaking, focusing on a project about Ronald Reagan titled In the Face of Evil. During this time, Bannon crossed paths with Peter Schweizer, author of Reagan's War, and publisher Andrew Breitbart, who famously called Bannon the Leni Riefenstahl of the Tea Party movement. Bannon's name is also attached to a variety of other projects, including Fire from the Heartland, The Awakening of the Conservative Woman in 2010, The Undefeated in 2011, and Occupy Unmasked in 2012. In 2006, displaying his business acumen, Bannon managed to get Goldman Sachs to invest in internet gaming entertainment. However, following a lawsuit, the company was rebranded to Affinity Media, with Bannon stepping in as chief executive officer, a position he held from 2007 to 2011. Bannon exhibited interest in political documentaries as well, drafting an 8-page outline in 2007 for a documentary titled Destroying the Great Satan: The Rise of Islamic Fascism in America. In this outline, he suggested that despite having the best intentions, the media, the Jewish community, and government agencies were unintentionally appeasing jihadists aiming to establish an Islamic Republic in America. In 2011, Bannon shared his thoughts on the 2008 economic crisis, the Troubled Assets Relief Program, and their role in sparking the Tea Party movement during a speech at the Liberty Restoration Foundation in Orlando, Florida. He highlighted how this situation influenced his films Generation Zero and The Undefeated. In 2007, Steve Bannon played a key role in the creation of Breitbart News, known for its far-right viewpoints, which include news, opinions, and commentary. According to Philip Elliott and Zeke J. Miller from Time, the site is recognized for promoting content that has been criticized as racist, sexist, xenophobic, and anti-Semitic, contributing to the narrative of the alternative right. Bannon himself described Breitbart as a gathering place for a diverse mix of conservatives, ranging from libertarians and Zionists to opponents of same-sex marriage and supporters of economic nationalism. Alongside these groups, the alternative right also found a voice, albeit a small one, within the site's community. Despite acknowledging the alternative right's existence on the platform, Bannon stated his absolute intolerance for any racist or anti-Semitic sentiments. After the death of Andrew Breitbart in March 2012, Bannon took over as the executive chairman of Breitbart News LLC. Under Bannon's guidance, the site shifted towards a more nationalistic approach and opened its doors even wider to the alternative right community. By 2016, Bannon was describing Breitbart as the platform for the alt-right, emphasizing the site's anti-establishment stance. However, former Breitbart editor Ben Shapiro accused Bannon of deviating from the founder's original vision in support of Donald Trump, labeling Bannon as a bully. Bannon's journey took him from Breitbart to the White House and back to Breitbart on August 18, 2017, as he resumed his role as executive chairman. However, his tenure was short-lived due to tensions arising from his departure from Trump's camp, leading to his exit on January 9, 2018. His departure was influenced by Breitbart's major backers, Robert and Rebecca Mercer, who were reportedly dissatisfied with Bannon's break from Trump, his unpredictable behavior, and his personal expenses. In addition to his role at Breitbart, Bannon also hosted Breitbart News Daily on SiriusXM's Patriot channel, where he continued to voice his perspectives. In 2005, Steve Bannon managed to get $60 million from Goldman Sachs and other investors for a company named Internet Gaming Entertainment, or IGE. This company was set up in Hong Kong, and it had a pretty unique business model. They hired people in China who were paid low wages to play the game World of Warcraft for hours on end. Their job was to collect virtual gold within the game, which could then be exchanged for in-game items. These items were then sold to actual players for real money. Now, this concept was divisive among the World of Warcraft community. Some players were happy because it saved them time. They could buy virtual gold instead of spending hours playing to earn it. However, others felt that buying gold was cheating and didn't support IGE's approach. This split led to a backlash against Chinese players specifically, with some gamers unleashing negative and offensive comments. Blizzard Entertainment, the creators of World of Warcraft, didn't stand by and watch. They ended up shutting down the accounts of those involved in what's called gold farming. IGE also faced legal challenges, including a class action lawsuit from a player who argued that the company's actions significantly ruined the gaming experience for others. Despite IGE's downfall, Bannon found something else that intrigued him: the online gaming community. He saw potential in the gamers, especially noticing how engaged and powerful this group could be, particularly noting their monster power. He zeroed in on what he saw as a mostly untapped group: rootless white males who were heavily involved in the game. Bannon believed he could harness their energy beyond gaming, particularly noting their involvement in issues like Gamergate as a gateway to broader political engagement, including support for Donald Trump. As of 2019, Bannon has been running Bannon's War Room. This show airs on Robert J. Sigg's Real America's Voice Network, and it's also available as a podcast and on the radio. Through this platform, Bannon continues to engage with and mobilize his audience. Steve Bannon was not only the executive chair, but also one of the founders of the Government Accountability Institute, a nonprofit organization recognized under the 501c3 tax exemption status. From its inception in 2012 up until August 2016, Bannon played a pivotal role, especially in promoting the book Clinton Cash by Breitbart News senior editor-at-large Peter Schweizer. The Institute is dedicated to uncovering factual indictments against politicians by analyzing deep web sources, tax records, flight logs, and documents from foreign governments, later sharing their findings with press. Although it officially claims to be nonpartisan, the focus of its investigations often centers on alleged corruption and mismanagement of funds within the Democratic Party, leading to accusations of spreading conspiracy theories about figures like Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. In terms of compensation, Bannon's earnings from the Institute ranged between $81,000 and $100,000 annually for the years 2012 to 2015, for an average weekly commitment of 30 hours to the organization's activity. Steve Bannon played a significant role at Cambridge Analytica, a data analytics company majorly owned by the Mercer family, who also have stakes in Breitbart News. This company is under scrutiny for allegedly using shady strategies to influence American voters during the 2016 election. Christopher Wiley, former employee who was instrumental in setting up Analytica, pointed out that Bannon was heavily involved in gathering Facebook data to target U.S. voters. Wiley described Analytica as a psychological warfare tool, illustrating the controversial nature of its operations. Bannon's compensation for his contributions exceeded $125,000. His ownership interest in Cambridge Analytica was valued between $1 million and $5 million. However, Bannon divested his interest in the firm when he joined the Trump administration in April 2017. In 2017, Steve Bannon established an organization called The Movement. It is all about championing right-wing populist groups in Europe, especially those that do not see eye to eye with the European Union's way of doing things. The Movement is not a fan of George Soros's Open Society Foundations either, with Bannon even describing Soros as evil but brilliant. They have got a team of 10 people working full-time. At the helm, as the executive director, is Michel Modrikaman, who leads the Belgian People's Party. The organization has caught the attention and earned accolades from notable figures, including Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán and Luigi Di Maio, who leads the Eurosceptic M5S party in Italy. In the run-up to the 2016 presidential election, Steve Bannon stepped into a pivotal role. Just 88 days before the election date, Bannon was named the chief executive of Donald Trump's campaign. To do this, he left behind his positions at Breitbart, the Government Accountability Institute, and Cambridge Analytica. Shortly after Bannon joined, Paul Manafort, who was the chairman of Trump's campaign at the time, was let go. Following Donald Trump's victory, on November 13th, Bannon was chosen to be the chief strategist and senior counselor to the newly elected president. This decision raised quite a few eyebrows. Groups like the Anti-Defamation League, the Council on American Islamic Relations, and the Southern Poverty Law Center, as well as Democratic Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid and some Republican strategists, expressed their concerns. They were troubled by past comments made under Bannon's leadership at Breitbart News, which they found to be racist or anti-Semitic. Despite this, Bannon received support from several conservative Jewish figures, including Ben Shapiro and David Horowitz, who defended him against the accusations of anti-Semitism. Alan Dershowitz initially supported Bannon, asserting there was no proof of his anti-Semitism, but later critiqued Bannon for making offensive remarks towards Muslims, women, and others. Yet, the Anti-Defamation League acknowledged, "We are not aware of any anti-Semitic statements from Bannon." Bannon himself denied being a white nationalist, describing his stance as that of an economic nationalist instead. His appointment led 169 Democratic House representatives to write to Trump, urging him to reconsider his decision, arguing that Bannon's connection to white nationalism sent a concerning signal about the type of presidency Trump aimed for. In his first media appearance outside Breitbart post-election on November 18th, Bannon made a notable comment, comparing the misunderstanding of his and Trump's intentions to the power wielded by dark figures like Dick Cheney, Darth Vader, and Satan, implying that such misinterpretation actually benefited their campaign. Donald Trump, addressing the controversy surrounding Bannon's appointment, stated in a New York Times interview that he would not have hired Bannon if he believed Bannon was racist or aligned with the alt-right. Bannon, in a BBC Newsnight interview, provided insight into his role in the campaign, highlighting his efforts to refine and refocus Trump's message, insisting, however, that Trump's unique characteristics were pivotal to the election win. He described his strategy as positioning Hillary Clinton as the face of a corrupt establishment. On a separate note, Reuters reported that on October 31, 2018, the Senate Intelligence Committee was investigating Bannon's activities during the campaign. This included looking into his knowledge about contacts between Russia and two campaign advisors, as well as his involvement with Cambridge Analytica, making it clear Bannon remained a figure of significant interest in ongoing inquiries into the campaign's conduct. In 2018, Michael Lewis shared a remark attributed to Bannon from the time when Trump's transition team was getting ready to take over the next administration. This quote was highlighted by The Guardian in the headline of an excerpt from Lewis's book titled The Fifth Risk, published the same year. Lewis's book delves into the comparison between how the outgoing administration prepared for the transition versus what actually happened. It uncovers a significant gap in readiness and interest, which is starkly illustrated by Bannon's quote. In a significant change made at the end of January 2017, the roles held by Bannon and the Chief of Staff were officially added as regular members of the National Security Council's Principals Committee by a presidential order. This committee is crucial as it is a high-level group that gets together to talk about national security concerns. This was a big shift from how things were done before. Some folks who worked in similar roles in the past weren't happy about this change. Susan E. Rice, who was the National Security Advisor for President Barack Obama, even called it stone-cold crazy. However, when questions arose about why Bannon was given a seat at the table, Sean Spicer, who was the White House press secretary at the time, defended the decision. He highlighted Bannon's 7 years of service as a Navy officer as a key reason he should be involved in these important discussions. When Donald Trump became president, he appointed Steve Bannon as his chief strategist, a position that had just been created. Bannon's role was so significant that he was almost on par with the Chief of Staff, and unlike many such influential positions, did not require approval from the Senate. Julia Hahn, an editor from Breitbart News, came over to the White House with Bannon and served as his aide and a special assistant to President Trump. In a chat with The Hollywood Reporter after the 2016 election, Bannon likened his role in Trump's circle to Thomas Cromwell in the Court of the Tudors, highlighting his significant influence. Not long after Trump took office, Bannon made headlines on January 26 by criticizing the media in a New York Times interview, saying they should be embarrassed and humiliated and keep its mouth shut, and calling them the opposition party that fails to understand the country or why Trump was elected president. Bannon, alongside Stephen Miller, played a key role in shaping Executive Order 13,769, which imposed severe restrictions on travel and immigration from 7 countries, put the United States Refugee Admissions Program on hold for 120 days, and indefinitely stopped Syrians from entering the U.S. The Economist pointed out that Bannon and Miller view Vladimir Putin as a similar kind of nationalist and opponent of globalism. In February 2017, Bannon was featured on the cover of Time magazine, dramatically labeled The Great Manipulator. The article spurred discussions about Bannon being potentially the second most powerful person in the White House, a testament to his perceived sway. During a March 14, 2019 hearing, Commerce Department Secretary Wilbur Ross was interrogated about adding a citizenship question to the 2020 census. Ross admitted speaking with Bannon, who then suggested he talk to Chris Kobach and Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Representative Lacey Clay accused Ross of attempting to undermine minority voting rights and lying to Congress, demanding his resignation. Ross defended the question addition as a response to a Justice Department request. Later, in April 2019, the Supreme Court heard arguments about this controversial census question. Reports surfaced that Bannon was involved in publishing stories to discredit H.R. McMaster by leaking information to alternative media sources. Furthermore, it was reported that the Trump administration allowed Bannon to bypass federal ethics rules, enabling him to keep in touch with Breitbart news editors, suggesting he remained influential at Breitbart. In the final moments of Trump's presidency, Bannon was pardoned, recognized as an important leader in the conservative movement. Bannon's tenure in the National Security Council ended in April 2017 after a reshuffle by H.R. McMaster, who Bannon had helped to appoint. With the resignation of Michael T. Flynn, Bannon's purpose on the committee as a check against Flynn was deemed unnecessary. Despite reports claiming Bannon threatened to resign if removed from the National Security Council, he refuted such claims, stating it was total nonsense. It was noted that Bannon had attended only one National Security Council meeting, underscoring the complexities within his White House tenure. Steve Bannon was repeatedly interviewed by Special Investigator Robert Mueller as part of the probe into Russia's meddling in the 2016 U.S. presidential race. Specifically, Bannon was questioned about Roger Stone's dealings with WikiLeaks. In November 2019, Bannon, under a subpoena and not by his own choice, testified at Roger Stone's federal trial. He revealed that Stone acted as the go-between for WikiLeaks and the Trump campaign, helping to prove that Stone had been dishonest with Congress. As a result, Stone was found guilty of all charges, including lying to Congress and tampering with a witness. However, on July 10, 2020, President Trump commuted Stone's prison sentence. When Bannon was arrested on August 20, 2020, Stone commented, "Karma is a bitch, but I am praying for him." In August 2020, the Senate Intelligence Committee informed the Department of Justice that they suspected Bannon, along with Jared Kushner and Donald Trump Jr., might have given them misleading information during their testimony about the investigation into Russian interference. In January 2018, the release of Fire and Fury, Inside the Trump White House by Michael Wolff marked a turning point in the relationship between Steve Bannon and Donald Trump, transforming them from allies to adversaries in the public eye. The book offered explosive comments attributed to Bannon, such as criticizing Ivanka Trump's intelligence by saying she was as dumb as a brick, labeling the meeting between Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, Paul Manafort, and Russian agents as treasonous, and suggesting that Robert Mueller's investigation would make Donald Trump Jr. crack like an egg on live television. Bannon also hinted at potential uncovering of money laundering related to Jared Kushner's family business transactions with Deutsche Bank. In his 2019 follow-up, Siege, Wolff continued this narrative, suggesting Trump had operated a shady business for 4 decades, to which Bannon remarked, "I think we can drop the semi part." Bannon was quoted expressing his belief that investigations into Trump's financial dealings would be damaging, noting, "This is where it isn't a witch hunt, even for the hardcore. This is where he turns into just a crooked business guy, and one worth $50 million instead of $10 billion. Not the billionaire he claimed to be, just another scumbag." This commentary shed light on Bannon's perspective regarding the potential consequences of the inquiries into Trump's financial history. In January 2018, after bits of the book Fire and Fury came to light, Trump quickly turned his back on Bannon. He claimed Bannon had lost his mind after leaving the White House and hurled various heated remarks his way. Trump went as far as to say on Twitter that Bannon had cried when he got fired and begged for his job, and even tagged him with the nickname Sloppy Steve due to Bannon's often unkempt look. By January 7, 2018, Bannon had changed his tune, apologizing for his slow reaction, pledging his steadfast support for Trump and his mission, and complimenting Donald Trump Jr. He clarified that his critical comments were directed at Manafort, not Trump Jr., although this was contested by the author of the excerpts, Wolff. Despite Trump's critical words, Bannon didn't cut ties with him. When Bannon appeared on CNBC in August 2019, he called Trump a great leader and an amazing campaigner. Trump responded warmly, labeling Bannon one of my best pupils and still a giant Trump fan, and mentioned he enjoyed working with Bannon. In 2018, Bannon showed his support by releasing a pro-Trump film, Trump at War, through his company, aiming to rally Trump's base before the midterm elections to maintain a Republican House majority. Bannon also launched a radio show and podcast, War Room Impeachment, in October 2019, offering strategies to counter the impeachment inquiries against Trump. In 2020, he started War Room Pandoc from his home, focusing on the COVID-19 crisis. Bannon claimed Trump was a follower of the show, even mentioning specific segments they discussed. A study by the Brookings Institution in February 2023 found that Bannon's podcast had more false, misleading, and unsupported claims than any other out of 36,603 episodes from 79 notable political podcasters. Steve Bannon's time at the White House concluded on August 18, 2017, shortly after the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally on August 11 to 12 turned violent. This event brought widespread condemnation of white nationalists, neo-Nazis, and alt-right activists from across the political spectrum. However, President Trump uniquely spread the blame to many sides, a stance attributed to Bannon by reports. The New York Times highlighted Trump's distinctive response amid national leaders' reactions. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People recognized Trump's denouncement of the hatred, but urged him to fire Bannon, citing him as a prominent white supremacist and a symbol of white nationalism that encouraged such sentiments from his advisory position in the White House. Regarding Bannon's departure, reports varied. John F. Kelly, the White House chief of staff at the time, is said to have given Bannon the choice to resign or be fired on August 18. Contradicting this, Bannon claimed he had already handed in his resignation 2 weeks prior, on August 4, intending to leave after a year in his role, which aligned with the anniversary of his joining Trump's campaign on August 14, 2016. He mentioned staying longer than planned because of the events in Charlottesville. The official word from the White House, through then Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders, stated that Kelly and Bannon mutually agreed on Bannon's last day, expressing gratitude for his service. Bannon then returned to Breitbart News as its executive chairman. Despite his departure, reports emerged weeks later about Trump and Bannon keeping in touch over the phone, especially when John Kelly was not present, indicating that their relationship continued beyond Bannon's White House tenure. Steve Bannon has been actively trying to replace certain Republican members of Congress with new faces that he believes are more in line with President Trump's policies. Back in October 2017, Bannon announced his intention to challenge nearly all the incumbent Republican senators up for re-election in 2018. His support came with two conditions. The candidates had to oppose Mitch McConnell remaining as Senate Majority Leader and agree to try to do away with the Senate filibuster. Bannon worked through his organization, Citizens of the American Republic, aiming to maintain the Republican majority in the House during the 2018 elections. It's important to note that this organization operates with financial secrecy, which means Bannon hasn't shared details about who funds it or the amount of money it's gathered. One of Bannon's notable achievements was his support for Roy Moore, who won the Republican primary against Luther Strange for an Alabama Senate seat in 2017, even though Trump had endorsed Strange. But when allegations of sexual misconduct from 9 women against Moore surfaced, Bannon stood by him, questioning the credibility of these accusations. This became even more controversial when Ivanka Trump criticized Moore's campaign, leading Bannon to bring up past allegations against her father in a sharp response. However, Roy Moore's campaign faced a major setback when he lost what was considered a secure seat for the Republicans on December 12, 2017. This loss led some Republican analysts to question Bannon's effectiveness as a political strategist. After leaving his role at the White House in August 2017, Stephen Bannon set his sights on a grand ambition to become a key figure in promoting right-wing populist movements across the globe. He traveled extensively in Europe, meeting with various far-right parties to foster a coalition of populist nationalist groups. His journey included stops at the Dutch Party for Freedom, the Freedom Party of Austria, the United Kingdom Conservative Party, and many others, spanning from the Swiss People's Party to Italy's League and the Israeli Likud. Bannon's vision extended beyond Europe, identifying leaders like Japan's Shinzo Abe, India's Narendra Modi, and several others as part of a global nationalist trend. However, Bannon's project to unify European far-right parties faced challenges. Despite appearances with figures like Marine Le Pen of France and Matteo Salvini of Italy, some parties criticized the initiative as poorly organized or expressed disinterest, highlighting the difficulties inherent in aligning diverse nationalist agendas. This lack of cohesion contributed to a less impressive performance than expected in the 2019 European Parliament elections. Apart from his political maneuverings, Bannon also involved himself with the Dignitatis Humanae Institute in Italy, a right-wing Catholic group. He planned to create a training academy for conservative activists there, although the Italian government eventually revoked the group's lease on a former monastery due to unmet criteria and unpaid fees. On the international political scene, Bannon acted as an informal advisor to Eduardo Bolsonaro, son of Brazilian presidential candidate Jair Bolsonaro, and involved the younger Bolsonaro in his organization, the Movement. Bannon also formed a notable association with exiled Chinese billionaire Guo Wengui, with financial transactions and joint ventures indicating a strong partnership. They launched fundraising efforts for GTV Media Group, which drew regulatory scrutiny, and Bannon benefited from Guo's resources, such as the use of a private jet. Yet their activities raised questions about compliance with campaign finance laws. In a bold move, Bannon and Guo declared a new federal state of China in 2020, aiming to challenge the Chinese government. This initiative culminated in Bannon facing U.S. federal charges for allegedly defrauding donors in a crowdfunding campaign for a border wall, leading to a swift distancing by Guo. In addition to political activities, Bannon and Guo supported Li Mengyan, a scientist who claimed COVID-19 was artificially created. They facilitated her move to the U.S. and supported her media appearances, although her allegations were widely discredited by the scientific community. In summarizing Bannon's post-White House career, it is marked by ambitious global political endeavors, controversial alliances, and significant legal and public relations challenges. In a conversation with Frontline, Ben Shapiro, a former writer at Breitbart News, shared that he generally tried to steer clear of Bannon, fearing the repercussions of landing on his bad side. Shapiro also mentioned instances where Bannon was heard yelling and swearing at colleagues at Breitbart. People who have worked closely with Bannon have characterized him as both self-centered and calculating in a way that's purely self-serving. Additionally, some former staffers told Politico about how Bannon would belittle employees, doubting their intelligence and treating them as if they were disposable nobodies. There were also reports from former employees claiming that Bannon tried to hinder their job prospects after they left Breitbart, although not everyone had negative experiences. A number actually spoke highly of Bannon, describing him as a generous and supportive leader, often reaching into his own pocket to cover their personal expenses. Jared Kushner, in his memoir, reflects on a tense relationship with Bannon, recounting moments where Bannon directly threatened him, including a severe threat to physically harm him following an accusation of leaking to the media. Kushner expresses that Bannon was a major source of trouble during his time in Washington, accusing him of being a frequent leaker and deceiver, especially in dragging Kushner into the controversy surrounding the Russia investigation. Bannon also faced legal and financial issues, not fully settling a legal bill of $850,000 demanded by the law firm Davidoff, Hutcher & Citron, LLP. This firm represented him in matters relating to his non-compliance with the January 6 committee subpoena and his involvement in the We Build the Wall fraud case. Consequently, Bannon was sued by the law firm, and in July 2023, the court ordered him to pay the outstanding balance. Michael Wolff shares that in 2017, Jeffrey Epstein introduced Steve Bannon to some of Epstein's acquaintances. Bannon then collaborated with Ehud Barak and lawyer Reed Weingarten in an effort to improve Epstein's public image. It was later revealed that Bannon seemed to have helped Epstein prepare for a 60 Minutes interview that, in the end, didn't happen. Bannon has confirmed that he recorded 15 hours of interviews with Epstein, but he clarified that the purpose wasn't to train Epstein for more interviews. Rather, he explained, the recordings were meant for a documentary about Epstein that hasn't been publicly announced. In early January 1996, Stephen Bannon faced charges related to misdemeanor domestic violence, battery, and attempting to dissuade a witness. These charges came about after his then-wife, Mary Picard, accused Bannon of domestic abuse. According to a report by the Santa Monica Police Department, after Picard made a 911 call, an officer who arrived at their residence noticed red marks on both her wrist and neck. However, the charges were eventually dropped because Picard did not show up in court. In the documents related to their divorce, Picard explained her absence, stating Bannon and his lawyer had threatened her. She recounted Bannon warning her that if she testified, he and his attorney would ensure she was perceived as the guilty party. Additionally, she mentioned that Bannon's lawyer had intimidated her with the prospect that if Bannon were incarcerated, she would be left without any financial resources and unable to care for their children. Bannon's attorney, on the other hand, has denied any allegations of pressuring Picard to refrain from testifying. On August 20, 2020, the news was released that Steve Bannon, along with 3 others, was charged by a federal grand jury. They are facing serious accusations of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering, each charge carrying the weight of up to 20 years behind bars if they are convicted. The charges were brought forward by the federal prosecutors from the Southern District of New York. They claim that Bannon, a veteran named Brian Colfage, and two others misused funds from the We Build the Wall campaign. This campaign, which was focused on gathering support and funds to build a wall between the U.S. and Mexico, allegedly did not use the money as promised to the donors. It started with a GoFundMe campaign in December 2018, and Bannon was quite vocal about it, right up to the day before he got indicted, even mentioning it on his podcast, War Room Pandemic. Prosecutors argue that Bannon and his co-defendants funneled money through a non-profit Bain. Bannon was running in a shell company to line their own pockets, despite telling donors their money would go toward constructing the wall. It is said that Bannon pocketed over $1 million from this scheme, secretly funneling some to Colfage and using other parts for personal gain, including paying off credit cards and covering personal travel costs. The government also plans to go after assets linked to Bannon's nonprofit, Citizens of the American Republic, and other Trump-aligned organizations. Bannon was arrested in a rather dramatic fashion aboard a luxury yacht owned by exiled Chinese businessman Guo Wengui off Connecticut's coast by U.S. postal inspectors. He pleaded not guilty on the day of his arrest and was released on a $5 million bond with $1.7 million required up front. He had to hand over his passport and limit his travel within the U.S. Following these events, both Donald Trump and his son, Donald Trump Jr., decided to distance themselves from Bannon, despite Trump Jr.'s earlier support of the fundraising effort. A court hearing on August 31st, led by U.S. District Judge Annalisa Torres, scheduled the trial for May 24, 2021. During this hearing, it was mentioned that prosecutors had gathered a substantial trove of evidence, including a large collection of emails from various devices and online storage obtained through search warrants executed earlier that year. Just before the clock struck midnight on Tuesday, January 19th, which was the last full day of Donald Trump's term as president, Trump went ahead and granted pardons to 144 people, and one of them was Bannon. The White House made this big announcement, sharing the names of those who were pardoned at 12:50 a.m. on January 20th, which marked Trump's final hours as president. Then, in May 2021, Judge Torres, sticking to the usual practice of dropping criminal charges when a presidential pardon comes into play, decided to throw out the fraud charges against Bannon. Judge Torres explained that since the pardon was legitimate, it made sense to dismiss the case against Bannon. She pointed out that while Bannon hadn't admitted to any guilt, receiving a pardon often suggests guilt on the recipient's part. In her words, accepting a pardon might be seen as admitting to that guilt. She even highlighted a powerful thought: if there be no guilt, there is no ground for forgiveness. When Donald Trump pardoned Steve Bannon, it only covered federal offenses. This means Bannon could still face state charges, which is exactly what happened. By February 2021, the Manhattan District Attorney had already begun digging into Bannon's finances, issuing subpoenas to Wells Fargo Bank and GoFundMe related to Bannon's We Build the Wall project. By August 2022, Bannon found himself facing money laundering, conspiracy, and fraud charges in New York over the scheme, which aimed to raise $25 million. Bannon has called these charges politically motivated, even suggesting without evidence that financier George Soros was somehow involved, a theory often echoed in right-wing circles. He's been defiant, stating he and Trump won't back down, famously saying, "They will have to kill me first." He turned himself in on September 8th. Bannon's trial was initially scheduled to begin on May 27, 2024, but it's been pushed back to September 23, 2024. The delay was due to the judge, Juan Merchan, also being tied eyes with the Trump hush money case at the original trial date. In late September 2021, Steve Bannon was subpoenaed by the U.S. House Select Committee investigating the events of January 6th. Bannon was ordered to appear for a deposition and provide documents by October 14th. However, he chose not to comply with these requests. As a result, Bannon's refusal led to the House of Representatives voting for his criminal contempt of Congress, a decision that was referred to the Justice Department. This action followed a unanimous vote by the 9-member committee and then a full House vote with a majority in favor. By November 2021, Bannon was indicted on 2 counts of criminal contempt, one for not handing over documents and one for not appearing to testify. He turned himself into the FBI shortly after. Despite his non-compliance, Bannon was released pending trial but was ordered to stay within the U.S. and keep authorities informed of his whereabouts. His appeals were unsuccessful, leading up to his trial in July 2022. Before his trial, Bannon expressed a willingness to testify, but the judge dismissed this as an attempt to evade accountability. His requests to delay the trial due to publicity concerns were denied, alongside his claims of executive privilege and attempts to bring high-profile Democrats to testify. The judge was dismissive of Bannon's defense strategy, suggesting instead that he consider a plea deal. The trial commenced with Bannon opting not to present any defense. Within days, a jury convicted him of both charges. Following his conviction, key members of the January 6th Committee and the Department of Justice underscored the significance of his guilt as a testament to the rule of law and democracy. Bannon was sentenced in October 2022 to 4 months in prison and fined $6,500, following the judge's intention to serve as a deterrent to others. Bannon's appeal against his conviction began but faced delays, including a postponement after a tragic event involving a government lawyer's family. Though not present at his appeal hearing, Bannon's conviction was upheld in May 2024, with the Department of Justice moving to have him start his sentence. Eventually, Judge Carl Nichols ordered Bannon to surrender to prison by the start of July, assigning him to a low-security facility in Danbury, Connecticut. Despite efforts to intervene by House Republicans and an emergency application to the U.S. Supreme Court, Bannon's plea was denied. He reported to prison on July 1, 2024, becoming the second Trump administration official jailed for contempt regarding the January 6 committee's subpoenas. On November 5, 2020, during an episode of his webcast, Steve Bannon made a shocking statement. He said he would behead Anthony Fauci, the nation's leading expert on infectious diseases, and FBI Director Christopher Wray, and put their heads on display outside the White House as a warning to anyone opposing President Trump. His comments were quickly acted upon by social media platforms. Facebook and YouTube removed the video, while Twitter banned his account for promoting violence. Even MailChimp, an email marketing service, cut ties with Bannon's newsletter. The following day, he lost the support of a lawyer who was representing him in a federal fraud case. Then, on January 9, 2021, Rudy Giuliani was a guest on Bannon's show, War Room. He accused the Democrats of stealing the presidential election and blamed them for the Capitol riot. Shortly after this appearance, YouTube took down not only the War Room podcast channel, but also another related channel titled Trump at War, a film by Stephen K. Bannon, for breaking YouTube's rules. Steve Bannon aligns himself with Reagan-era politics and identifies as a populist. In 2020, he faced arrest over charges tied to the We Build the Wall fundraising effort, specifically conspiracy to commit mail fraud and money laundering. During a 2018 conversation with journalist Michael Lewis, Bannon reflected on the election strategy that led to their victory. He emphasized, "We got elected on drain the swamp, lock her up, build a wall. This was pure anger. Anger and fear are what get people to the polls." He pointed out that the real challenge comes not from the Democrats, but from the media, suggesting the strategy to flood the zone with stuff as a way to handle them. The Guardian highlighted in January 2018 that Bannon shares ideological similarities with figures like Stephen Miller, Tucker Carlson, and Benny Johnson, as well as Raheem Kassam and Matthew Boyle, who were mentored by Bannon at Breitbart, indicating a broader circle of influence with shared views. Steve Bannon, who identifies as an economic nationalist, is known for advocating a decrease in immigration and favoring trade limitations with countries like China and Mexico. He also proudly labels himself Christian Zionist due to his staunch support for Israel. While some have categorized him as a white nationalist, Bannon himself dismisses this label. He is a proponent of shrinking the size of the federal bureaucracy, famously expressing at the Conservative Political Action Conference his support for what he called the deconstruction of the administrative state. Regarding the Paris Climate Agreement, Bannon was a notable critic during his tenure in the Trump administration. He played a pivotal role in convincing President Donald Trump to exit the agreement, successfully arguing against U.S. participation in it. Steve Bannon holds a strong view on reducing immigration to the United States, including both unauthorized and authorized entries. He believes that immigration poses a threat to the country's sovereignty. Bannon has made remarks about the leadership in Silicon Valley, highlighting that there are too many chief executive officers who are Asian or South Asian, and he thinks this situation undermines civic society. During a radio interview in 2015, he openly opposed the idea of the United States accepting refugees from the Syrian civil war. In another appearance on the radio in 2016, Bannon described unauthorized immigration as horrific and went on to express that authorized immigration is at the core of the issue. He found the levels of authorized immigration to the United States alarming, suggesting that legal immigrants have, in a way, overwhelmed the country. Additionally, Bannon played a significant role as the chairman of We Build the Wall. This organization was actively involved in efforts to expand the barrier between Mexico and the United States. Steve Bannon views himself as a staunch advocate for what he describes as economic nationalism. He is not supportive of crony capitalism, the economic theories that originate from Austria, or the capitalism model advocated by Ayn Rand. Despite these objections, Bannon still considers himself a steadfast supporter of free market principles. One of his ideas for financial reform includes increasing the federal income tax rate to 44% for individuals earning more than $5 million annually. According to Bannon, this strategy would enable a reduction of taxes for the middle class. Moreover, he is entirely in favor of a significant increase in government expenditure on infrastructure, amounting to $1 trillion, even referring to himself as the main advocate of such a comprehensive plan. Back in 2014, during a conference at the Vatican, Bannon was forthcoming in his criticism of Wall Street's involvement in the financial crisis of 2008. He openly critiques the bailouts provided to the large banks and expresses profound frustration with the absence of accountability for Wall Street's contribution to the crisis. Bannon believes that this lack of oversight has fueled widespread populist anger and the emergence of movements like the Tea Party. In the midst of ongoing debates across the nation about gun violence and the regulation of firearms, Bannon has not shied away from expressing his strong support for expanded access to guns, highlighting the significance of the Second Amendment. He has straightforwardly warned Trump against leaning towards any form of gun control, pointing out the intense pushback it could provoke from the president's supporters. This was particularly evident following the 2017 Las Vegas shooting, when Bannon predicted that any move by Trump toward gun control would spell disaster, arguing it would upset his base even more than an immigration amnesty bill. Moreover, Bannon has stirred controversy with his suggestion that children should be armed and trained in how to use firearms. Speaking at the Turning Point USA's America Fest in December 2023, he argued for the inclusion of gun training in school programs as a way for kids to protect themselves from bullies, making his stand on gun rights even clearer. He tends to question the benefits of military actions overseas, voicing opposition to increasing U.S. involvement in conflicts such as the war in Afghanistan, the Syrian civil war, and the trouble in Venezuela. Regarding Afghanistan, he favored Erik Prince's idea of using private military forces instead of American troops. He is convinced that the crisis with North Korea in 2017 cannot be resolved militarily. Bannon views countries in Europe, the Persian Gulf, the South China Sea, the Strait of Malacca, and allies like South Korea and Japan as overly reliant on the United States for protection, criticizing them for not doing enough to defend themselves. He argues that countries in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization should spend at least 2% of their gross domestic product on defense. He is against modernizing the U.S. nuclear weapons and supports pulling out from the Iran nuclear agreement. Bannon praised the strategy of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman during the 2017 diplomatic feud with Qatar. While serving as White House chief strategist, Bannon was not in favor of the missile attack on Shayrat in 2017, a decision that was outvoted by Kushner. He also questioned the rationale behind the assassination of Qasem Soleimani in 2020, pondering if it was truly necessary and worried that escalating tensions with Iran might alienate Trump's base, especially families of service members. Bannon has self-identified as a proud Christian Zionist, showing strong support for Israel. He has had regular discussions with Trump donor Sheldon Adelson and was concerned about efforts to renew peace talks in the Middle East. He has labeled Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas a terrorist and suggested that the West Bank should be given to Jordan and Gaza to Egypt. Steve Bannon has a pretty striking view on the current state of affairs between the U.S. and China. He doesn't just see it as a Cold War. In his eyes, it's already a hot war, especially when it comes to information and the economy. Bannon is quite worried about China's influence growing in Asia. He sees the country as on an expansion path and thinks this is leading us toward a major cultural clash globally. According to Bannon, it's crucial to stand up to the Chinese Communist Party, believing that if we don't confront them now, the disputes in information and economy are just the beginning, potentially leading to an actual war. Bannon is convinced that a military clash between the U.S. and China in the South China Sea could happen in the next 10 years. A particular point of concern for him is China's building of artificial islands. He compares these to stationary aircraft carriers that are equipped with missiles, highlighting the strategic advantage they could provide China in a conflict. People who have met Steve Bannon report that he initially showed support for the British National Party and the English Defence League in the United Kingdom, but later shifted his backing to the United Kingdom Independence Party. Bannon also encouraged Boris Johnson, whom he praised and said he had been impressed with over the past year, to take on Prime Minister Theresa May. This was reported by BuzzFeed News, pointing out that Bannon and Johnson were in private communication when Bannon visited Britain in July 2018. Additionally, it was noted that the two had been in touch by text during the period when Bannon served as the White House chief strategist and Johnson was the British Foreign Secretary. Steve Bannon has come out in defense of former President Donald Trump's connections with and commendations of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Bannon holds the view that those with traditionalist values regard Russia as a friend. He articulated his opinion by stating, "Believe that at least Putin is standing up for traditional institutions and he's trying to do it in a form of nationalism. And I think that people, particularly in certain countries, want to see the sovereignty for their country. They want to see nationalism for their country over a unified European approach." Highlighted in the book War for Eternity, it's documented that Bannon even met with the well-known Russian thinker Alexander Dugin in Rome during 2018 to push for stronger ties between the United States and Russia, alongside promoting traditionalist ideology. In the same year, Bannon shared his intentions to kick off a new political venture aimed at bringing together populist groups across Europe in time for the 2019 European Parliament elections. He disclosed his plan to set up base in Brussels and dedicate half of his time to work across Europe, starting from November of that year. Subsequently, Bannon established an organization named The Movement, with the goal of linking up far-right factions across Europe. Bannon is a supporter of various European right-wing populist and national conservative groups. This includes Hungary's Fidesz, the French National Rally, formerly National Front, Spain's Vox, the Party for Freedom in the Netherlands, Germany's Alternative for Germany, Italy's Northern League, Austria's Freedom Party, the Sweden Democrats, the Danish People's Party, both the Flemish Vlaams Belang and New Flemish Alliance in Belgium, Poland's Law and the Justice, and the Swiss People's Party. Back in 2007, Steve Bannon came up with a documentary idea titled Destroying the Great Satan, The Rise of Islamic Fascism in America. The premise of this film was that there was an ongoing effort by Muslims to take over the United States. By 2010, Bannon had expressed quite explicitly his views on Islam, stating, "Islam is not a religion of peace, Islam is a religion of submission." He did not shy away from voicing his disappointment in George W. Bush for describing Islam as a religion of peace, either. Bannon's criticism extended further as he described Islam in today's context as something much darker than what Adolf Hitler and the Nazis represented. He was quite clear about his stance on being Sharia compliant, saying, "If you're Sharia compliant, we don't want you here," and he even accused U.S. newspapers of adhering to Sharia law. Bannon did not stop there. He pointed out what he saw as a failure of leadership in Europe, saying, "The elites in Europe are allowing an Islamic invasion to take place." Furthermore, he commented on the battle against what he termed Islamic fascism as growing faster than governments can manage. In 2014, during a talk at a small conference at the Vatican, Bannon reflected on the historical conflict between the Judeo-Christian West and Islam. He expressed admiration for the efforts of ancestors to fend off Islamic influence at key historical moments, such as in Vienna or Tours, praising the legacy of the Western Church they left behind. Bannon also saw modern-day Russia under Putin and America under Trump as Christian bulwarks against the Islamic State and radical Islamic terrorism. During his time in the Trump administration, Bannon, alongside Stephen Miller, played a pivotal role in the crafting of Executive Order 13,769. This controversial order restricted entry to the U.S. from 7 predominantly Muslim countries. His involvement with this policy has linked Bannon with the counter-jihad movement, further highlighting his stance on Islam and its followers. Steve Bannon views transhumanism as a dangerous ideology that represents the technocratic elite's religion. He claims that technology moguls are aiming to control humanity and do away with religious beliefs through the use of advanced technologies like gene editing, robotics, and the forced introduction of tiny implants. Bannon is deeply troubled by the idea that transhumanists are chasing after eternal life, in the process showing little regard for religious faiths. His worry over transhumanism ties into his skepticism about vaccines, sharing similar views to those of Alex Jones on the matter. In conversations with Joe Allen, a regular guest on his podcast, Bannon voices his concerns about artificial intelligence and other modern technologies, drawing inspiration from the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski. During his podcast sessions, Bannon has proudly declared himself a Luditic, signaling his fears that human beings might soon be supplanted, a concern he doesn't take lightly. In the book War for Eternity, Benjamin R. Teitelbaum explores Steve Bannon's ideology, which is a mixture of an intense version of the traditionalist school philosophy, paleoconservatism, and mainstream conservative views in the United States. Bannon declares himself a conservative and denies being a white nationalist. His views encompass nationalistic and right-wing populist perspectives. In a memorable event from March 2018, Bannon delivered a stirring speech to the French right-wing National Front, urging them to regard accusations of racism and xenophobia as badges of honor, positing that their strength grows daily while their adversaries weaken. This speech, which energized the audience, was notable for its seeming endorsement of racism. Bannon's ideology is further influenced by the fourth turning theory by Neil Howe and William Strauss, predicting a global rise in populism and state-managed authoritarianism. This theory, suggesting that societies go through predictable cycles, influences Bannon's initiatives, including his film Generation Zero. He is significantly influenced by René Guénon's traditionalism, which he views as a stronghold against modern secular assaults. Bannon mixes these principles with Catholic social teachings on subsidiarity, that issues should be managed at the most local, competent level. His beliefs are informed by readings of the Bhagavad Gita, The Art of War, works by Russian nationalist Alexander Dugin and Brazilian thinker Olavo de Carvalho, though he has urged Dugin to abandon anti-American and pro-Chinese stances. Notable intellectual figures affecting Bannon's thought include Nassim Nicholas Taleb, Curtis Yarvin, and Michael Anton. He admires paleoconservative Pat Buchanan and columnist Walter Russell Mead, while the political thinker Edmund Burke also significantly influences his ideological direction. Bannon has referenced controversial personas and concepts, including Julius Evola and Charles Morris, and has shown approval of Vladimir Putin's traditionalist views. He has frequently cited The Camp of the Saints, a novel criticized for its depiction of immigration as destroying Western civilization, and has shown intrigue toward historical figures like Mussolini for his charisma and style. His filmmaking has been influenced by Leni Riefenstahl, recognized for her Nazi propaganda films, implying he seeks a similar impact in his political documentaries. Bannon's interest in philosophical ideas and figures, from Henri Bergson's Élan Vital to Joseph Schumpeter's concept of creative destruction, highlights his broad array of influence, including an original attraction to traditionalist philosophy through George Gurdjieff's teachings. In summary, Bannon's ideology is an intricate mix of traditionalism, conservative ideology, and a deep interest in cyclical historical theories, all underlined by his engagement with a diverse selection of intellectual sources and controversial notions. Steve Bannon has been through marriage and divorce 3 times and is a father to 3 grown daughters. His first walk down the aisle was with Kathleen Suzanne Hoof. Together, they welcomed a daughter, Maureen, into the world in 1988, but eventually their marriage ended in divorce. Bannon's second attempt at marital bliss was with Mary Louise Picard, a former investment banker whom he married in April 1995. Just 3 days into their marriage, they were blessed with twin daughters. However, by 1997, Picard was seeking to dissolve the marriage. During the divorce proceedings with Picard, a serious accusation emerged. She claimed Bannon didn't want their children attending the Archer School for Girls because, in his view, there were too many Jewish students. He supposedly said he didn't want his children going to school with Jews because he believed Jewish parents raised their children to be whiny brats. Bannon's spokesperson fiercely denied these allegations, pointing out that Bannon had, in fact, chosen the Archer School for his daughters. Bannon's third marriage was to model Diane Clohessy in 2006, but this relationship also ended in divorce by 2009. Not to be overlooked, Steve Bannon's brother, Chris Bannon, has made a name for himself as a television producer. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more content.